Welcome back to our channel on this beautiful day. We have incredibly intense updates from Genoa City and the scorching deserts of Las Vegas to dive into today. Grab a cup of coffee and settle in, because the drama surrounding the Newman family has reached an absolute boiling point. The landscape of the Nevada desert has just been transformed into a terrifying canvas of destruction. The abandoned gas station, meant to be the final resting place for the Newman family, became the epicenter of a catastrophic explosion. Matt Clark orchestrated a sadistic death trap with chilling precision, intending to wipe out his enemies in a single inferno. The sheer force of the blast sent shockwaves through the barren landscape, igniting the night sky with a terrifying glow. It was a moment of absolute horror that seemed to seal the tragic fate of Sharon, Noah, Nick, and Adam Newman. The deafening roar of the explosion echoed like a death knell, leaving nothing but billowing smoke and agonizing uncertainty in its wake. Standing on the periphery of this nightmare was Sienna Bacall, a woman who had just risked everything to intervene in a tragedy. Having miraculously revived Nick Newman from a fatal overdose with Narcan just moments prior, Sienna was forced to witness the culmination of Matt Clark's twisted revenge. The sight of the gas station erupting into a fireball sent a paralyzing wave of terror crashing over her. She watched the flames lick the sky, her heart pounding against her ribs as she feared the absolute worst. The traumatic echoes of her own brother's fatal overdose intertwined with the horrifying spectacle before her, convincing her that despite her heroic efforts, she had ultimately failed to save the Newmans from a fiery grave. The agonizing helplessness she felt at that moment was completely overwhelming, anchoring her to the dusty ground as she stared into the heart of the inferno. Miles away from the blast, Matt Clark sat entrenched in his own psychopathy, watching the destruction unfold through his surveillance cameras. A sickening wave of triumph washed over him. He reveled in the chaotic beauty of the flames, fully believing he had achieved the ultimate victory over the family that haunted his existence. The deep-seated hatred he harbored for Sharon and Nick Newman had finally culminated in what he perceived to be a flawless execution. He gloated in his vehicle, his mind painting grotesque pictures of the Newman legacy turning to ash. The satisfaction of a psychopath is a terrifying thing to witness, and Matt was completely consumed by the delusion that he had permanently eradicated the powerful dynasty. The catalyst for the ultimate salvation of the Newman family did not originate in the desert, but rather in a tense hotel room miles away. Chelsea Lawson had been pacing the floors, her intuition screaming that the man she loved was walking directly into a fatal snare. The paralyzing anxiety that gripped her was not born of paranoia, but of a deep understanding of the darkness surrounding Matt Clark. In a moment of sheer desperation, Chelsea made a decision that would alter the course of history. She bypassed authorities and reached out to the one force of nature capable of moving mountains. She placed a frantic call to Victor Newman, laying bare the terrifying reality of the trap that had ensnared his sons. It was a monumental gamble, knowing the wrath Victor could unleash, but her love for Adam propelled her to seek the ultimate protector. The moment the horrifying news reached Victor Newman, the polished exterior of the ruthless corporate titan shattered, revealing the raw, primal panic of a terrified father. The realization that his flesh and blood, his legacy, and the family he had spent a lifetime fiercely guarding were trapped in a lethal snare sent an icy jolt of adrenaline through his veins. Victor is a man who operates on control, a patriarch who dictates the terms of engagement, but in that fleeting second, he was entirely at the mercy of time and distance. The historical weight of his protective instinct ignited a terrifying fury within him. He did not succumb to the paralyzing fear, instead, he weaponized it. The thought of losing Nick and Adam to the sadistic whims of a ghost from the past was an unacceptable reality, prompting a massive mobilization of resources. Victor Newman does not merely react to a crisis, he commands the very elements to bend to his will. Within moments of Chelsea's desperate plea, Victor deployed his most elite security operatives, turning the Nevada desert into a militarized zone of salvation. The race against the ticking clock was agonizing, a high-speed pursuit across the barren landscape driven by the singular mandate to bring the Newman family home alive. The tension inside the deployment vehicles was palpable, a silent understanding among the operatives that failure was not an option when the patriarch's bloodline was on the line. Victor himself was a tempest of controlled rage and desperate hope. His mind calculating every possible variable while his heart pounded with the universal terror of a parent facing the unimaginable loss of his children. The intervention of Victor's elite team was nothing short of miraculous, a surgical extraction executed in the narrowest margin between life and death. Before the final detonation could consume the captives, the operatives breached the perimeter of the abandoned gas station. They navigated the labyrinth of chains, toxic fumes, and impending doom with ruthless efficiency. Adam, Nick, Sharon, and Noah were pulled from the jaws of the inferno, their bodies battered, their lungs burning with smoke, but their lives preserved against all odds. The physical toll of the captivity and the near-death experience was immensely evident on their soot-stained faces, but the collective gasp of survival was the sweetest victory against the darkness. Victor's unparalleled resources had shattered Matt Clark's perfect murder. When Victor Newman finally arrived at the smoldering ruins of the gas station, the visual was profoundly cinematic and deeply chilling. The powerful patriarch stood amidst the ashes and the dying embers, his silhouette framed by the destruction that was meant to be his family's tomb. The relief of seeing his sons and loved ones alive was instantly eclipsed by a cold, calculating, and terrifying wrath. Standing in the epicenter of the failed trap, Victor made a silent, unshakable vow to the universe. He declared an absolute war against Matt Clark, a promise that there would be no corner of the earth dark enough, no hole deep enough, for the psychopath to hide. The full weight of the Newman Empire was now singularly focused on the total annihilation of Matt Clark. It was no longer a matter of justice, it was a matter of total vengeance. The immediate aftermath of the rescue was a chaotic symphony of flashing lights, medical assessments, and profound emotional shock. Sharon and Noah clung to each other, their bodies trembling as the adrenaline began to recede, leaving behind the heavy, suffocating blanket of trauma. They had stared directly into the abyss, enduring the psychological torture of captivity and the horrifying spectacle of Nick's near-fatal collapse. The realization that they had survived a literal inferno was difficult to process, their minds struggling to bridge the gap between the certainty of death and the miracle of their rescue. The desert air, once thick with the smell of smoke and fear, now carried the heavy sighs of survivors who were forever changed by the harrowing ordeal they had just endured together. Amidst the collective relief, the focus drastically shifted to the devastating physical and psychological state of Nick Newman. His body was an absolute war zone, ravaged by the tainted fentanyl, the violent shock of the Narcan revival, and the subsequent trauma of the explosion. He was physically shattered, gasping for air, and teetering on the edge of a complete physiological collapse. The terrifying reality of his severe addiction could no longer be hidden behind a facade of control or denial. The absolute rock bottom of his journey stared him directly in the face, illuminated by the harsh emergency lights and the worried eyes of his family. Nick was forced to confront the agonizing truth that his reliance on the pills had nearly cost him his own life and placed everyone he loved in the crosshairs of a madman. Adam Newman stood by his brother's side, carrying a burden of guilt so immense it threatened to crush him. The memory of encouraging Nick to take the tainted pill replayed in his mind on an agonizing loop. He had watched his brother's heart stop, completely paralyzed by the sickening realization that his advice had almost been the instrument of Nick's demise. However, as the immediate danger faded, Adam's overwhelming guilt transitioned into a fierce, uncompromising brand of tough love. He recognized that Nick was standing at a deadly crossroads, and coddling him would only lead to another tragedy. Adam stepped into the role of the strict enforcer, channeling his own trauma and guilt into a relentless push for his brother's salvation. The psychological confrontation between the two brothers amidst the ruins was intensely raw and profoundly necessary. Adam refused to let Nick retreat into his usual defensive posture or downplay the severity of his dependency. He relentlessly pushed Nick to vocalize his struggle, demanding that he admit the full extent of his severe drug addiction. The walls of Nick's stubborn denial slowly began to crumble under the weight of Adam's insistence and the undeniable evidence of his near-death experience. It was a deeply painful but vital unearthing of the truth, a necessary breaking of the ego so that the healing process could finally begin. Adam made it unequivocally clear that Nick had to accept professional help immediately, leaving no room for negotiation or delay in the face of such a catastrophic wake-up call. When the dust finally settled and the survivors were secured, Adam experienced a profound emotional crash as he reunited with Chelsea Lawson. The adrenaline that had sustained him through the nightmare rapidly evaporated, leaving him confused, exhausted, and deeply vulnerable. As the details of their miraculous rescue came to light, Adam's confusion transformed into a staggering, overwhelming sense of gratitude. Learning that it was Chelsea who had made the desperate, terrifying call to his father shifted his entire perspective. He realized the immense risk she had taken and the profound depth of her love and intuition. The reunion was a quiet, powerful acknowledgement of how incredibly close they had all come to the absolute end, and how a single act of desperate courage had rewritten their tragic destiny. As a deeply invested observer of this sprawling, emotional saga, witnessing Victor Newman drop his impenetrable corporate armor to become a fiercely protective, terrified father is a profoundly moving experience. There is a raw, visceral ache in seeing a family pushed to the absolute brink of annihilation, only to be pulled back by the sheer, unyielding force of a patriarch's desperate love. It resonates so deeply with the universal human fear of losing those we hold dearest, reminding us that beneath the unimaginable wealth and the ruthless power plays, the Newmans are bound by the exact same fragile, fiercely guarded human connections that define us all. The tears shed in the aftermath of the flames feel incredibly authentic, echoing the silent, desperate prayers we all whisper in the dark for the safety and well-being of our own families. With Matt Clark still slithering in the shadows and Victor Newman unleashing his full, terrifying wrath upon the world, the ultimate hunt has officially begun. But one burning question remains to keep us on the edge of our seats. Will Nick Newman be able to survive the harrowing, agonizing road to addiction recovery before the enraged psychopath strikes again? Or is the Newman family simply waiting for the next catastrophic explosion?